Welcome to Washington in Focus, your source for the week's top stories in the state of Washington. I'm Cole Lauterbach, managing editor for the Center Square Newswire service. This week, we'll be discussing Governor Jay Inslee's ordering of a broad spending freeze, Washington officials pushing back on adopting a voter-approved ban on natural gas bans, Spokane City Council majority making life difficult for its conservative minority, and one of the last progressives on Seattle City Council calling it quits. That's ahead on Washington in Focus. I'm Cole Lauterbach.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Washington in Focus. I'm Cole Lauterbach. Now, let's jump into the headlines. Whether it's from overspending or other undertaxing is up for debate, but Governor Jay Inslee told Washington's various departments of government that the credit cards are pretty much frozen until further notice. Washington editor Brett Davis covered this announcement. Brett, give us the details of what this lame duck governor is hitting the brakes on.
I'm sure Inslee appreciates your description of him as a lame duck governor.
He is.
That's true. such a nice term. Anyway, with the state facing a projected operating budget gap of between $10 and $12 billion over the next 4 years, Governor Inslee has issued a directive to freeze, quote, most non-discretionary and non-essential, end quote, travel or spending on hiring, service contracts, goods and equipment purchases, and travel. In his directive, he urged other state officials to implement similar cost-saving measures, calling upon non-cabinet agencies, higher education institutions, boards and commissions, and other separately elected officials to impose similar restrictions.
Now, there are some exceptions which are, when you read them off, they're reasonable. I mean, you don't want to have government grind to a halt.
Right. There are actually a lot of exceptions. The hiring freeze, for example, it doesn't apply to things like positions that directly impact public safety, positions essential to the health and welfare activities of state government, and of course, positions that generate revenue.
And now in terms of the spending, money going out and money coming in, it appears as though the state of Washington's officials and others in Washington has set up kind of a blame game, per se, in that they're saying, well, this is, on one side, you have government officials, for the most part, saying, we've seen a pronounced drop in revenue, and that is what's to blame for this sudden shortage of funding. On the other side, you have some, mostly Republicans, and then others on the outside of government looking in saying, listen, you have a record budget, $72 billion. And you're coming to us now. It appears as though you're setting up an argument to raise taxes yet again. Who do you feel like is winning this blame game? Or do people just look at this and say this is just a bunch of silly finger pointing?
I think a lot of people think it's finger pointing at this point. Generally speaking, the Office of Financial Management and Democrats, like you said, they say state agencies, they need another $10 to $12 billion in additional funding just to maintain current programs and services. They blame slowing revenue forecasts, rising costs, and expanded need. Republicans and other critics, they say the deficit is basically right. They say the looming deficit is basically the result of it's a spending problem that legislators made choices. They chose to increase appropriations in excess of what were already increased revenues. So they spent more money, even though more money was coming in, and that bill is coming due now. So we'll see what the public thinks, but there's a kind of a back and forth now. There was a recent legislative preview. Basically, that's what Democrats and Republicans said. Those two arguments I laid out, they were very civil with each other. But, the one side said it's a revenue problem and the other side said, no, it's not. It's a spending problem. So we'll see what happens.
And now with this freeze, the state government puts out a lot of money. There's a lot of programs and such. But a freeze like this, even with exceptions, though it is a lot of money, is this enough to stop the bleeding? Is just this spending freeze enough for them to end this budget year in the black?
My guess is it's not enough. I mean, you mentioned the budget of $72 billion and, a $10 to $12 billion budget gap. That's a significant amount of that. So Inslee is going to propose his budget later this month. We'll see what that says. Then, of course, during the upcoming session, which starts on January 13th, the House and the Senate will present their budgets, and then there'll be a bunch of negotiations, and hopefully they'll get a budget passed by the end of the 105-day session. So it's going to be a fun session.
Yeah, should be. As always, we enjoy it. Thank you, Brett. Washington voters chose to put a halt to its government's push to wean residents from fossil fuels on Election Day, passing Initiative 2066. The measure bans the state from banning, even suggesting a pathway away from the use of natural gas. Now, state officials seem to think that they're not under much obligation to do anything different. Capitol correspondent Carlene Johnson covered the recent meetings on the topic. Carlene, it seems like everybody's just waiting for a judge to force this issue.
Yeah, it seems like that's what it's going to come down to, Cole. Yeah, the State Building Code Council voted November 22nd to have their technical experts, their TAG team, which stands for Technical Advisory Group, review revisions that were made earlier this year to the residential and commercial building codes. And those are the things that were targeted by Initiative 2066. So those changes basically said, we need to get more electric heat pumps installed in new construction, newly built houses, apartments, big commercial buildings. That was the whole goal of the code revisions early in 2024. And environmental groups and other supporters of that basically, they said we need to incentivize electric heat pumps over natural gas as part of the effort toward combating climate change. So that was the whole goal of the changes. Then came 2066 to undo that. But the council, as you mentioned, they're saying there's going to be lawsuits over this. And so they're kind of taking what they say is a wait and see approach. They say we're not up for time-wise, we're not up to make any major code revisions anyway, despite 2066 saying otherwise. So they say right now we're going to kind of wait and see what the courts do. In the meantime, we'll kind of make a good faith effort, they say, to sort of attempt to comply or look like we are without necessarily making any big code revisions that might be undone by the courts anyway. So yeah, it kind of this big waiting game at this point.
Now, was it the Building Code Council or was it another group that said that they were expecting to challenge this based on the fact that it was too many, the Proposition 2066, right. Initiative 2066 did too many things, and it violated a provision, I believe, in your Constitution that says you can only have a proposition do one thing. It can't be like an omnibus proposition that voters approve because those lead to a bunch of improprieties. Was that the Building Code Council or was that someone else?
That's the group of environmentalists and others that are these folks that are Clean Energy Washington, all these groups that came together to fight 2066 and the other initiatives that all failed on the November 5 ballot. But these groups say that it violates, as you mentioned, the single subject rule. So yeah, by Washington State's Constitution, these initiatives have to deal with only a single subject. But you've got the folks that are planning legal challenges saying, okay, wait a minute, that deals with repealing utility planning requirements for Puget Sound Energy, the state's largest utility. And they say separately, preempts the state energy codes and local building standards. So they're saying there's 2, maybe 3 separate issues they contend that 2066 deals with. So they think there's a violation of the single subject rule. At least that will be the gist of their legal challenge. Building Industry Association of Washington is saying, no, it's all one thing. It covers one specific subject, might approach it from different avenues, but it's all about natural gas and propane and doesn't cover anything else. So they're confident that it would, withstand legal challenges.
Now, and you mentioned BIAW, they are they were one of the driving forces behind 2066 because they have a very vested interest in this. If PSC comes out and says no new construction can have gas hookups, that is a fundamental shift in their members' entire business model. And not to mention making it more expensive to put in things like heat pumps and et cetera. Now, they were pushing people to reach out to the Building Code Council and say, we voted for this. You must adhere to this. We don't care if you disagree with it or not. This is the new law of the land. Are you hearing that they're going to go before a judge and try to make the state adhere to the will of the voters?
Yeah, my contacts at BIAW had certainly talked about litigation as of Thursday, December 5th, when the initiative, took effect legally 30 days post the election. There was no lawsuit going to be imminently filed. I was told by BIAW, no, it's not going to happen, on the 5th. So we'll see what's going to happen in the coming days. They've certainly prepared potential litigation. They've made no secret of that. But in the meantime, you've got Senator Linda Wilson, Republican. She's, she didn't seek re-election, so she's leaving office, but she's been one of the champions of this as on the Environmental Council. And she sent an email out Thursday to the full Building Code Council, basically saying, you have no choice. You adopt this. 2066 is law of the land as of December 5. Prohibiting the, penalties, prohibition, discouragement of natural gas in any way. And she says that the Building Code Council's argument that they're under no obligation to make these immediate changes, she says, heck, you are. She basically said when the legislature enacts new energy code requirements, the council's required to promptly amend their codes to align with it day one when, right. Outgoing Governor Inslee signs that. They have to update their codes that day. So she says, she's calling them on saying, you're saying you don't have to do this now because it's not within the code, requirement of the time you're going to amend codes. She says, forget that. You have to do this immediately. And so she's reminding them, you're obligated by law. So it's going to be fascinating to see, what legal challenges are filed, when they are, and how, as you mentioned, how the, code requirements are followed, adhered to, or not, by local code enforcement officers here on out. That's what's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah. And all the legal challenges, it almost makes me wonder, too, if BIAW wasn't holding their cards now to focus on intervening on a challenge that would nullify 2066 from these, green groups. The one thing that happened, I mean, context is important with everything. And this got passed. And then weeks later, you have what was one of the most destructive winter storms I have ever seen outside of genuine hurricanes in the Southeast in this bomb cyclone weather cycle, where I grew up on a farm, and we had electricity, we had running water, and indoor plumbing. But we also had gas because it was common for us to lose power, not just for days, but for weeks at a time. And if it were not for that gas hookups, we would not have been able to stay in our home when it's 4 degrees outside and, we've got no power because of an ice storm. Yeah.
That was a devastating storm and knocked out power for more than 400,000 plus people. Across Western Washington for some of them 5, 6, 7 days. I have family that live in Enumclaw that didn't have power for 6 days. So, you've either got a wood burning stove or if you've got, gas stove, furnace, you could keep your house warm. Thankfully it wasn't 4 degrees. As you mentioned, it was, we were down in upper 30s, low 40s. Uncomfortable when the house gets down to 50 degrees. Yeah. But that's been one of the arguments from proponents of the initiative saying, you know what, we don't have the infrastructure right now to support an all electric power grid. You're going to tell people they can't have a natural gas furnace in their home to keep them warm when the power goes out for a week. That's an ugly situation. It becomes a life-threatening situation.
Yeah,
if it does,
I was just gonna say, lives are at stake when you come to
100%.
that. When it comes to that, in terms of rural Washington. Thank you, Carlene. Eastern Washington might be markedly more conservative than the western side of the Cascades, but the city of Spokane's majority more resembles that of the center-left members of Seattle City Council. With the democratically aligned leadership, the city's two conservative members now say rules are being changed to marginalize their positions. Eastern Washington reporter Tim Klauser covered the new proposal. Tim, what's the plan here?
Yeah, Cole, we're talking about the city council's rules of procedures that they adopt every year. Now, typically you wouldn't think stuff like this would stir up too much drama, but that's not the case in Spokane, as you said. Now, there's a lot of changes in this year's version, mostly little stuff like clarifying certain rules, land acknowledgements, taking public testimony from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, basic stuff like that. But the two changes that has everyone up in a roar right now is changing the requirement from 2 council sponsors to 3 in order to move legislation out of committee, and scheduling all briefing and legislative meetings on Tuesdays instead of Mondays, like it's done the last 65 years.
Why Tuesday? Did they give a reason?
The council president said, it's a means to boost community engagement. She said that she had some city staff and community members come to her saying Mondays are rough for making the legislative meetings and Tuesdays would work better. Now, Spokane Valley, which is neighbors the city, also schedules its council meetings on Tuesdays, and the county schedules most of its meetings on Tuesdays as well. It's sort of a trend that's growing across the state to host these meetings on Tuesday. So it's not out of the usual. The issue is that Councilmember Bingle, one of the conservative members, one of 2, has never been able to attend Tuesday meetings because of a family scheduling conflict. He said that changing these meetings to Tuesdays essentially limits his ability to effectively represent his constituency. And his peer in District 1, Councilmember Cathcart, shared the same feeling. They both feel like the other districts have tried to silence them the last few months for pushing legislation that would raise oversight around city-funded homeless shelters and police enforcement around that population downtown.
And the 3 to pass thing seems, obviously scheduling something where the head of the council knows that one of the members is absolutely not able to come. And there was another one too, that I believe one of the more progressive members also said that they would have to move mountains to try and make it there on Tuesday because of work requirements or something like that, because these are part-time positions. But the one thing that stood out to me was the 3 sponsors to pass requirement. That almost to me feels more pointed than just changing the schedule.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you there. I mean, right now the requirement is you need 2 council sponsors. So technically any district could have an issue that they see directly affecting their constituency, and they could take it to a vote, whether or not the rest of the districts agree. Now, changing this to 3 would require any district to have support from another in order to push any legislation. Bingle and Cathcart have a hard time with this, especially being in District 1, which encompasses downtown Spokane and really the more impoverished areas of the city. So they argued that, if you change this requirement from 2 to 3, all the legislation that we really see as important to our constituents would have no way to get to a vote because they routinely shoot them down. They said it's essentially just another extension of moving the meetings to Tuesday. They see it as a way of maybe trying to, as the council majority, trying to push one of them to potentially resign, is what they said.
Now, what did Wilkerson say about this? I mean, she clearly had to have been asked.
Yeah, it sounded like a lot of these changes came from Council President Betsy Wilkerson. She said, look, moving the meetings, that's not intended to silence District 1 by any means. Like I noted earlier, she said it's a way to boost community engagement, but she didn't stop there in her statement. She said, look, every 4 years we elect council members, and should we let one person's needs on the council behoove the rest of the city? She essentially said, look, we have an opportunity next year, because Councilmember Bingle has 1 year left in his current term, to elect someone that could be available on Tuesday, which Bingle and Cathcart had issues with. They called her out for electioneering on the dais, but they see it as an extension of this trend of silencing dissent or the minority's viewpoint.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll see whether or not the council goes through with this coming up soon. Thank you, Tim. Appreciated. Seattle City Council was a bastion of progressive philosophy as recently as 2020. With drugs and crime and homelessness reaching crisis levels, voters chose to elect more centrist members in hopes to address the city's issues. Now, Seattle reporter Spencer Pauly reports one of the last holdouts from that era has decided to pack it in. Who's leaving, Spencer?
So we're seeing Seattle City Councilmember Tammy Morales resigning from her position next month. She was representative of District 2, which covers the Chinatown International District and other parts of South Seattle. She has held this seat since 2020.
Yeah. She was brought in, and that was what I had referenced to, is the 2020 council was elected under what appeared to be a progressive mandate. And you saw a lot of major changes come about with that council. Did she give a reason for leaving?
The reason is mental health, Cole. She wrote a letter to her constituents saying that her job caused her mental and physical well-being to deteriorate. Now, this decision, while surprising, makes sense based on what has gone on this year for Morales. Now, what I mean by that is at the beginning of this year, like as you said, there's an influx of new city council members that come in with a more centrist approach to governing. And throughout the year, Morales was a constant lone vote in opposition of legislation passed this year. Now, this centrist government, these centrist council members were more so prioritizing public safety and helping boost up Seattle Police Department officers.
Now, any words on oftentimes when you see public officials like this, that it's, I'm announcing my resignation, and then 2 hours later they announce they've been hired as CEO of this nonprofit or something or other, going to work for a utility. Any words on what she plans to do after?
Well, she's taken the time away to be with her children, and she's going to be caring for her ailing father, what she said. Now, she said she's going to take some time to think about, the next opportunity to best serve what she says are the underrepresented communities in Seattle. But as of now, there's no, announcement of joining
no set plans.
Yeah.
Got it. Who's replacing? Who is going to replace her at this point, and describe the process?
Yeah, so this is basically a case of deja vu for the Seattle City Council, because what we're going to see is next month, the council is going to have to find someone else to fill that gap, the position. Now, this happened January of this year when Seattle City Council member Teresa Mosqueda was elected to the King County Council. So the Seattle City Council elected or nominated Tanya Wu to fill her position as a citywide representative of Seattle. Notably, Tanya Wu was the one that lost to Morales in the 2023 election for District 2. Now, Tanya Wu lost this election, her seat, to another progressive, the now replacement progressive representative in Alexis Mercedes Rink. Now, we'll see if Wu gets nominated again to this position, but we'll see. It's going to be decided sometime next month.
I did notice that she posted a video to social media feeds congratulating Councilmember Morales on a great career, and was saying high praise. Definitely the tone, not the tone of a former election rival. It would be, you say deja vu before. Holy cow, this is full Yogi Berra deja vu. Thank you. And a big thank you to our journalists for sharing their stories today. Stay up to date with these and more at thecentersquare.com. I'm Cole Lauterbach, and until next time, this has been Washington in Focus.